Over 6 weeks ago, the skies above one of the world's most complex airspaces went from one of the busiest corridors on Earth to a war zone. More than 20,000 commercial flights have been cancelled. A fighter jet crew was shot down deep in enemy territory and rescued in one of the most complex search and rescue operations in US military history. Stealth bombers ghosted through defended airspace, and cheap drones took out billion-dollar radar systems. Hi, my name is Sammy. I'm a qualified commercial pilot looking for my first flying job as well as training to become a flight instructor. And on this channel today, we are looking at an aviation accident to understand what went wrong and most importantly, what can we learn from it. And today, we're not talking politics, we're talking aviation, aircraft, systems, and what it actually means to fly in and around a conflict like this in this day and age. But before I get into the aviation side of things, it's important to acknowledge that innocent people, including women and children, have lost their lives, whilst at home, work and schools, families have been devastated and the suffering is still ongoing. My thoughts and prayers are with them. On February 28, 2026, US and Israeli forces launched nearly 900 strikes in just 12 hours, targeting air defenses, missile infrastructure, and command facilities across Iran. The operation was codenamed Operation Epic Fury. It involved advanced military equipment, including precision-guided munitions and stealth aircraft. We're talking B-2 Spirit bombers, F-15E Strike Eagles, F-35s, and a massive support armada. 2 aircraft carriers, the US Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, were deployed to support the operation, with a third on the way. Now let's break down how those aircraft actually worked, starting with the one that makes air defense commanders lose sleep, the B-2 Spirit. Let's talk about why this thing is so terrifying from an air defense perspective. Radar works by bouncing radio waves off an aircraft and detecting the return signal, called a radar cross-section, or RCS. A Boeing 747 has an RCS roughly the size of a barn door. The B-2, it's been publicly described as roughly the size of a large bird. The flying wing design has no vertical tail, no sharp 90-degree angles. Every surface is angled to deflect radar energy away from the receiver rather than back at it. The aircraft is also coated in radar-absorbing materials. Essentially, the skin of the aircraft absorbs radar energy and converts it to heat rather than reflecting it. The engines are buried deep inside the wing, with curved inlet ducts so radar can't bounce off the fan blades. Historically, one of the biggest radar reflectors on any jet. The engines exhaust over the wing's trailing edge, mixing hot exhaust gases with cool air to reduce the infrared signature that heat-seeking missiles lock onto. A conventional radar might detect a B-2 at a fraction of the range it would detect a normal aircraft. By the time you get a solid return, it may already have released its weapons, which are gliding toward you from miles away. This is why on night 1 of Operation Epic Fury, air defenses that took Iran years to build were reportedly neutralized in hours. The aircraft delivering the first strikes were effectively invisible to the systems designed to stop them. Now let's talk about what happens when the missile does find you. This conflict gave us one of the most dramatic examples in recent history. On April 3rd, an F-15E Strike Eagle, call sign Dude 44, was shot down over Iran by a shoulder-fired missile. Both crew members ejected. What followed was a 7-hour rescue operation involving over 150 aircraft. But let's rewind. How do pilots handle missile threats in the cockpit? The RWR, Radar Warning Receiver. Every tactical jet has one. It listens for radar signals and tells you when you are being tracked, locked on, or when something's been launched at you. Different tones, different symbols on the scope. It's constantly talking to you. When a lock is detected, the first response is usually chaff and flares. Chaff is a cloud of metallic strips that creates a false radar return. Flares are burning magnesium. They create a heat source to seduce infrared guided missiles away from your engines. This is where pilot skill matters enormously. The goal is to defeat the missile's energy. A missile has to turn to follow you. The harder and faster you maneuver, especially pulling high G forces toward the missile's flight path, the more energy it bleeds off trying to track you. If you can force it to overshoot or break lock, you survive. If you're low enough, getting below the radar line of sight cuts the uplink to radar-guided missiles. Many fighter pilots refer to this as hugging the earth. It's uncomfortable, fast, and requires total focus. But it denies the ground-based radar the geometry it needs to guide the weapon. The F-15E crew of Dude 44 were hit by a shoulder-fired manpad, a man-portable air defense system. These are short-range, infrared-guided, and extremely hard to defeat because they're fired from the ground with no radar signature beforehand. There's often almost no warning. Both crew members ejected. The pilot was rescued 7 hours after the crash, and the weapons systems officer survived by hiking a 7,000-foot ridgeline in the Zagros Mountains. An extraordinary story of survival, story for another day. Here's the part of this conflict that every defense analyst is talking about, and it should fascinate almost every aviator. Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles throughout this conflict. Some of them got through, and they hit very expensive, very sophisticated targets. Iranian attacks damaged or destroyed radar systems, a THAAD missile defense system, and multiple MQ-9 Reaper drones across US bases in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, and Kuwait. One attack damaged multiple KC-135 tanker and an E-3 Sentry AWACS, which is the airborne early warning and control aircraft that serves as the eyes of the entire air campaign, with drones that cost a fraction of the interceptors sent to stop them. Now here's the maths problem, a small one. A small one-way attack drone might cost $20,000 to $50,000. The interceptor missile fired to destroy it costs $1 to $3 million. Launch enough of them simultaneously from different directions and altitudes, and you force a defender into an impossible equation. You run out of interceptors before they run out of drones. This is called saturation. It's not a new concept, but a cheap drone technology has made it accessible at a massive scale. There's also the radar horizon problem. Ground-based radar has a physical limit. The Earth curves away, low and slow. Flying drones that hug the terrain, that can fly under radar coverage for much of their flight path, only appearing on screens when they are very close to the target. By that point, reaction time is next to nothing, very minimal. The US lost at least 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones during the conflict, not to air-to-air combat, but to these asymmetric tactics. The lesson for military aviation: high cost doesn't automatically beat low cost if the low cost option can overwhelm your magazines. So what actually happens inside the cockpit on a night like February the 28th? I want to walk you through a composite picture of what a strike package looks like based on publicly available doctrine. This is not classified information. Mission planning is exhaustive. Crews study the target area, threat envelopes, the entries and exit routes, tanker rendezvous points, divert airfields, weather and communication plans. You brief contingencies for every scenario possible. What if the tanker's not there? What if the target's obscured? What if you take a hit? There's a million possibilities. Pre-flight. You look at the weapon status, fuel state, systems checks. The jet talks to you through its displays. Everything has to be green before you roll. So looking at the entry, depending on the threat environment, you might be at altitude behind the stealth package that's already opened the door for you. Or you might be low and fast. Terrain following in the dark using a FLIR, forward-looking infrared sensor. The RWR is always alive. You're monitoring threats, your wingman, tanker track behind you, and the target simultaneously. The terminal phase. This is where the weapon system officer in the backseat at the crew of Dude 44 really earns their pay. They're managing the targeting pod, designating the aim point, making sure the weapon has a good solution. In fast movers, this can happen in seconds. The weapon releases. You're already thinking about the exit, getting out of the threat environment as fast as possible. The exit routing is just as carefully planned as the entry. You've got a tanker to find, and you've got to get home. The US operation on April 3rd alone involved 155 aircraft, 4 bombers, 64 fighters, 48 refueling tankers, and 13 rescue aircraft. All coordinated, all dependent on each other. That's not a strike, it's a symphony. Now, as a passenger, what does all of this mean for you? First, the hard truth. The disruption to commercial aviation has been unprecedented. Over 20,300 flights were cancelled at 7 major airports, including Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi, in just the opening days of the conflict. Big hubs. The 2026 conflict disrupted global travel and trade, halted flights in and out of the Middle East, and led to shipping reroutes to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest for international passengers, was impacted by Iranian retaliatory strikes and had to be temporarily evacuated. 2 commercial aircraft, an Emirates A380 and Saudi A321, were hit while parked at Dubai Airport during the early stages of the conflict. So, is it safe to fly today? The best way to go about this as an aviator. As of this week, Iran and Kuwait remain the only flight information regions clearly closed. Most other Gulf airspace is either partially open or running strict corridor systems. Major carriers including Emirates, British Airways, Lufthansa, they've all cancelled or reduced flights to the region, with some suspensions extending into the summer of 2026 this year. Airlines are rerouting long-haul flights that normally pass through the Middle East. A journey that would follow a relatively direct path may now arc thousands of miles around the region. This clearly adds hours to flight times. The practical guidance right now. Flights outside the Middle East that operate in normally. You've got London to New York, Sydney to LA. These flights are fine. Flights routing through Gulf hubs, you need to check with your airline. Schedules are fluid. Travel to within the conflict zone, you need to follow your own government's travel advisory. The UK FCDO, US State Department, and EASA all have active warnings in place. EASA's conflict zone information bulletin has been extended through late April, with warnings active for airspace over Bahrain, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Qatar, the UAE, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. The airlines are not being reckless, they are being cautious. When they're not flying a route, it should tell you something. Aviation has always existed alongside geopolitics. The skies are never truly neutral. But what this conflict has shown us in real time is just how sophisticated, how complex, dire, and how human modern air warfare really is. A B-2 ghosting through radar, a fighter crew surviving a missile strike and walking out of the mountains, a drone that costs less than a second-hand car that can take out a multi-million-dollar system, and hundreds of airliners rerouting around the war to keep their passengers safe. This is the world we fly in, and understanding it, whether you're in the left seat of a wide body or in the jump seat of a fighter, it matters. If you found this useful, drop it a like, share it with another aviator, and subscribe because there's a lot more to break down. Until then, blue skies, Sam is fly.